Hey there, this is Michelle and welcome back to the Canadian History, a Chronology channel. Today's episode, number 29, is about Canada's continued relationship to the American Revolution. This will be part 5 of our journey. Now, before we start, let's take a quick moment to review what we saw and heard in the last episode. We saw that Guy Carleton returned to Canada as its overall governor, and that the Constitutional Act of 1791 divided the colony of Quebec along the Ottawa River into Upper and Lower Canada. We also saw that an odd mix of imperial and republican views formed a new government, and that John Graves Simcoe is considered the father of Upper Canada. And finally, from 1792 to 1796, Simcoe did extensive surveys and established a working political and legal structure. He also founded what would become Toronto. Okay, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the slave trade in Canada and also take a peek into what's going on in Canada's interior. Lieutenant Governor John Graves Simcoe vehemently opposed slavery, but the new landowners and loyalists now in Upper Canada had brought hundreds of slaves with them. Even Iroquois chief Joseph Brant brought many slaves with him to Upper Canada. Well, in the face of strong public opposition, but with the support of Chief Justice William Osgood, Simcoe forced legislation through that banned slavery in Upper Canada. The Slave Act of 1793 was passed, making Upper Canada the first British colony anywhere in the world to abolish slavery. Unfortunately, the act did not free existing slaves, it just banned any future slave trade. And what about Lower Canada? Well, Chief Justice William Osgood was eventually transferred from Upper Canada to Lower Canada, and in 1802 he handed down another historic decision. He declared that, quote, slavery is inconsistent with British law, end quote. As a result, approximately 300 slaves were freed in Lower Canada. And finally, when Great Britain got around to officially abolishing slavery throughout their empire on August 1, 1834, freeing approximately 18,000 people, there were only 2 slaves left in Upper Canada that needed emancipation. Of course, the Slavery Act of 1793 had absolutely no impact or effect in the United States. Okay, now let's jump into Canada's interior to see what's happening there. With France now out of the picture, the English Hudson's Bay Company should have been in its glory, as the fur trade was all theirs now. But that wasn't the case. Trade hates a vacuum, so with the French gone, Scottish and American merchants hired French voyageurs and picked up where France had left off. Going against the HBC was the fact that these merchants now had the French-Canadian knowledge, the native suppliers, and Scottish financing. And of course, Montreal once again became the gateway for this revitalized fur trade, and it boomed. Before this, the HBC just sat up north and let the natives bring furs to them. But now they had to mobilize and go inland. In 1769, they sent Samuel Hearne on an overland journey across the barren lands of the Arctic. Hearne's journey was the first to reach the Arctic Ocean by land, but did little for the HBC fur trade. More significant, though, was his founding of the Cumberland House post in 1774 in modern-day eastern Saskatchewan. This would be the HBC's first inland trading post and expanded their operations into Canada's interior. Now, interestingly enough, HBC employees were paid a salary. Now, why would this be an interesting fact? Well, because a competitor was on the horizon, the Northwest Company, who paid commission, making their employees more motivated to search for and collect furs. And how is this related to the American Revolution in the South? Well, with war raging in the South, the Canadian fur trade was forced to shift further to the north. By 1788, a Montreal trader named Peter Pond, originally from Connecticut, led a brigade of voyageurs into the unexplored areas of Lake Athabasca, past HBC claims into what is now northern Alberta. Here he founded Fort Chipewyan, which became the northern terminus of the inland continental fur trade. Pond and his voyageurs had outflanked the HBC. The following year, in 1789, traders in Montreal organized a joint venture to expand trade further north and out to the Pacific. They called themselves the Northwest Company. The employees of the Northwest Company, called the Nor'westers, were daring and often violent. They occupied abandoned French forts and became a larger threat to HBC profits than even New France did in its heyday. By 1800, as cited by historian S.F. Wise, the Northwest Company was shown to be, quote, the first transcontinental economic system in Canadian history, end quote. Now, with the American Revolution ending, tensions would shift to the frontier in Canada. As a reminder, according to the terms of the 1783 Treaty of Paris, Great Britain had promised to abandon its forts in the Ohio Valley. Well, as of now, they had not. This matter wasn't settled until the signing of Jay's Treaty in 1794. Now Great Britain finally evacuated their western forts. The British had also managed to get a guarantee that the natives there would be able to cross the border without having to pay duty. We can still see the impacts of Jay's treaties today when the Mohawks clash with the government. Canada calls the trade between Canada and the United States carried out by today's Mohawks as smuggling. The Mohawks claim this trade is their legal and ancestral rights. Well, that's it for this episode. Let's summarize. In this episode, we saw that the Slave Act of 1793 was passed, making Upper Canada the first British colony anywhere in the world to abolish slavery. And when Chief Justice William Osgood was transferred from Upper Canada to Lower Canada, he handed down another historic decision in 1802 that also banned slavery in Lower Canada. We learned that in 1769, the HBC sent Samuel Hearne inland, where he founded Cumberland House in eastern Saskatchewan in 1774. And that by 1788, a Montreal trader named Peter Pound founded Fort Chipewyan, outflanking the HBC. In 1789, traders in Montreal organized a joint venture to expand trade further north and out to the Pacific and called themselves the Northwest Company. We also saw that against the terms of the 1783 Treaty of Paris, Great Britain did not immediately vacate its forts in the Ohio Valley. The Jay's Treaty of 1794 resolved this. Now, please stay tuned for the next episode, episode 30, where we jump into the American Revolution, Part 6, and its continued impacts on Canada. In this episode, we'll look into what's happening on Canada's Pacific coast. Now remember, at any time, feel free to leave comments or questions below, and I'll do my best to respond to them all. And please, be a true Canadian and be polite. And if you like this content, please subscribe to my channel and give it a thumbs up. And hit the bell if you'd like to be notified of any new content. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.